Hello, I am Scott Herbst, founder of Six Flex Training and Consulting, and you are listening to or watching The Flex, a podcast where we have conversations with people who are expressing leadership with the intention that it open access to you expressing yours. I am really glad to have Reena Naami here with me today. Reena is the owner and founding CEO of Spark Center for Autism, and they provide applied behavior analysis, speech therapy, occupational therapy to kids with autism and other disabilities in Southeast Michigan. As always, I'm going to keep the introduction short so that you can really hear Reena's story from Reena. Reena, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Scott. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for coming. As always, where I always start these is I really want to hear your story about what had you take the leap to found your company, and you can go back as far as you'd like, but
Sure.
But that's really what I'm interested in knowing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of got my beginnings in the field through my undergrad. I was a psych major, knew I wanted to work with kids, but didn't really know specifically what direction. So I ended up taking a behavior analysis course and got to work through a rat lab, got to have my own rat in an operant chamber, teach them how to press a lever
You were
for sugar
doing that
water.
as an undergrad?
I was doing that as an undergrad. Yep.
Oh, cool. Wow.
Yeah, it was very cool. Loved it, ended up becoming a TA for that lab, became a research assistant in the department, and really just fell in love with behavior analysis as a science. And I said, yep, this is what I want to do, but not really into rats and pigeons. So did some research and took a gap year after I graduated to kind of figure out my direction, and ended up going to grad school at Florida State. Which I felt really fortunate to do. I think that the program was phenomenal and gave me just so many skills and really everything that I needed to be successful in this field. At the time, after I graduated, Michigan, which is where I'm from, born and raised here, didn't really have a whole lot of jobs available. At that time, legislation had just passed in 2012, and I graduated in 2013. So I could count probably on one hand how many companies there were that were providing ABA services. I remember there were 40 BCBAs in the state.
Legislation that mandated behavior.
Yes, correct. Yep. So I actually ended up getting a job in Texas, where I followed my now husband because he had a job there. So worked for an in-home company that was based out of Illinois. And, I kind of look back at that experience as part of the reason why I ended up going the route of owning my own clinic. Like, unfortunately, I think so many people in this field, I did end up learning a lot of what not to do. Was put into some, situations that didn't feel so ethical, and that was not really setting myself or any of the clients up for success. At one point I had 18 clients and no other clinical support. Never got a performance evaluation in the time that I worked there. So it just didn't feel like it was the right fit anymore. And at the time, a friend of mine who I actually, funny enough, grew up across the street from, somehow we never went to the same schools, but ended up in the same field. She called me, and she was having similar experiences in another state, and said, hey, I'm coming back home to Michigan. I can't find anything. Do you want to move back home and start a clinic with me? And I was like, yes, please. So we did. And that was in 2014. That business partner has since stepped away back in 2017, just for personal reasons. So I took over fully from there. But that was kind of how we got started. It was just the two of us in this tiny 1,800 square foot space. We had a wait list before we opened because, again, at the time, there just wasn't a lot there. And I think all the providers that were in the state, we were all kind of like figuring it out together. which
Yeah.
was nice. Doesn't look so much like that anymore, but yeah, and it was just the goal was, of course, to provide high quality ethical services. Also, my hope was always to come back home to Michigan. We were for a long time ranked one of the worst states to live in if you had autism. We are still among some of the lowest in terms of special education services.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
And hopefully I will be able to have a part of that.
Awesome. Um, and so great, thank you.
Sure.
And one thing I just want to underline from that is that people, make sure like you're giving people feedback. Let them know how they're
Yes.
doing. People really want to know this,
Yeah.
and you'll lose good people if you're not.
Yeah.
And in an environment like this, it can be really easy for people to feel like they're out there on their own
Yep.
with jobs like this. So
Absolutely.
I think that's probably the first nugget. Um, and so you've been in business since 2014.
Mhm.
Um, talk a little bit about how you've grown and some of the
Yeah.
challenges you faced. And I mean, you've got a lot to share, I imagine.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, gosh, where to start? So yeah, in the 11 years that we've been open, we have grown. I now have just in the 40s, not many employees.
Yeah.
Um, I we've moved around a couple of times, and now I actually own a building where a clinic is, which is great. And we service usually at any given time about 35 kids.
Hmm.
And there have been definitely some challenges, and there still are, and there always will be, of course. But one thing that I have always really strived for is to make sure that people do understand that I am also a clinician. And while I don't carry my own caseload now anymore, it is something that I think can set a lot of companies apart. And that's not to say that there are, other companies that aren't clinician owned that aren't good. Obviously, there are a lot out there, but I think that that is something I have always really strived to make sure that my staff understands that I get it. I understand the difficulty with this job. I understand burnout because I've been there. I understand, kind of a lot of those aspects that come with the job as a BCBA, as a clinician, as well as now as an owner. And it's funny, having been in business as long as I have, people will sometimes ask me questions about, my quote unquote expertise. And,
Hmm.
I've had the pleasure of being able to like mentor some other people too, who have said like, I want to do this. I want to own my own company. I think I can do it better, things like that. And I look back at my own experience, and I'm very honest with people when I say um, it was naive of myself and my old business partner for us to have opened at the time that we did. I was 1 year out of grad school. I
Hmm.
was 1 year certified, and that is not how I would recommend other people do it. I'm fortunate that I had really, really good mentors, and I still do. 11 years later, and I still make sure that I have mentors because I don't know everything, and I'm not ever going to know everything. Um, and there are always going to be people who know more than I do and who can help me along the way. And hopefully I will be able to do that for other people as well. But um, yeah, I mean, we've grown to, we started as just ABA. And like I said, it was just originally my business partner and I, we were the BCBAs and the technicians at the
Can
time.
I pause just to
Yeah,
underline something?
yeah,
Because
please.
I've heard that from a lot of people, that the importance of mentorship and having people outside of your own head to bounce ideas off of, take questions
Yep.
to. That's something that I am still, I personally find that it's easy for me to look to myself for the answers.
Mhm.
So it really works for me to consciously pull myself out and say, hey, what, like with maybe another business owner or someone
Right.
who's been there, to what do you think of this idea?
Yep.
And so I just want to underscore that. And that isn't just something that is useful for the business owners.
Right.
That's true if you are a first year BCBA. I would recommend, or not, like just like a manager in any
Yep.
profession, is find someone who you can go to for advice. And if it's not your boss, create that somewhere
Right.
else. Yeah.
Yep. Agreed.
Um, but go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. It was uh just two of us, and we gradually started adding, additional staff and growing. And within our first year, we outgrew the space that we had, moved to a larger space. At one point expanded to 2 locations, but once my business partner left, I decided to kind of consolidate again and go back down to 1. And that's how I like it. I will always just have the 1 space. But we have grown. Our space is over 14,000 square feet now, which is awesome.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah, it's big. It's a big
Yeah.
space. We have to use walkie-talkies to communicate because
Uh-huh.
it's too big otherwise. Um, we added speech therapy eventually, and then occupational therapy, and now we do, some other like social skills programs. We do like a summer, not quite a summer camp. It's kind of a combination of a camp and like a summer school, like learning program,
Yeah.
which is really cool. Trying to provide internship opportunities. We train a lot of grad students, which I really love. One of my goals too is um, I I love the field so much, and I really want other people who feel the same to love it as much. And um, I have found that the best way to do that is by providing, good grad training. So we've had quite a few students, through here, and we've grown our own BCBAs too. So 2 out of my 4 BCBAs right now were students of ours, which is awesome. Um, and yeah, that's where we're at right now. So
You mentioned that you have dealt with burnout.
yes.
And I know that's something that a lot of people deal with as they take on more responsibility.
Mhm.
Will you share a little bit about what that
Yeah.
was like for you? And
Yeah.
then what you, because you don't present now as burned out.
No.
Occurs like, yeah, like
Yeah.
lively and
Yeah.
yeah. Um,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there were kind of like two pretty significant moments in my time as a business owner that will always stand out and are always kind of the 2 moments that were the biggest challenges that I faced. And I will say that like a lot of my burnout was probably more related to being a business owner as opposed to being a clinician.
yeah.
But it is definitely like, both things are incorporated. But first was actually when my business partner had chosen to step down.
Mhm.
We worked very well together. We grew up friends, and
Yeah.
we are still friends. It's fine. But it was unexpected, and it was a big challenge
Mhm.
because it was a personal situation that happened, and it happened very quickly. So there wasn't really a lot of time for me to process what was going on. And I had to make a lot of decisions that I think in hindsight, I was not prepared for.
Mhm.
And funny enough, like I've had people over the last couple of years who have said, hey, I'm in this situation. My business partner is leaving. They want to sell me their shares. What are some things, like some factors that, I should be looking into? And I was like, well, let me tell you, because I didn't know these things before. But it was a really big challenge, both financially, it was really tough, and then also just mentally, because at that point I was taking on the role of an entirely additional person. Um,
Mhm.
and I had also found out within a couple of weeks that I was pregnant with my first child. So
Oh, wow.
it was a lot that was happening all at once.
Yeah.
And I struggled with that a lot. And I have since learned you know, something that's really funny, and I think a lot of BCBAs tend to be like this. We're really good at telling other people what they should be doing or things that they should be, you know, working on. Not always as good about doing that for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so
I'm
I
laughing
didn't,
because I have a dog
yeah.
that stands on the coffee table and barks, and I'm like,
I should
I
know how
have
to
a
do this.
PhD in the science of learning,
Yep.
and I teach other people. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I didn't take a lot of my own advice. I didn't utilize my skills as a behavior analyst to work through a lot of that. You know, didn't seek outside help, and just kind of tried to survive and was on survival mode for a while.
Yeah.
I took a 2-week maternity leave because I couldn't do anything else. Again, in hindsight, I know that I could have, but at the time, that was one of the biggest challenges. And there were a lot of days where I was just like, why am I doing this? Why am I
Yeah.
still putting myself through this? Like, this is awful. And I think part of what got me through it is, you know, kind of being a little bit stubborn and saying like, well, no, I have to get through this. I can get through this. It's fine.
Yeah. But it
Um,
was tough.
yeah, yeah, it
And
was
I
a big
ask a
challenge.
question about that because you said like it looked to you that I have to do this.
Yeah,
You know, I can't, got to take 2 weeks. There's nothing
yeah,
else to do. In hindsight, you see that you could actually do something.
yeah,
I'm curious, can you say a little bit about how it looked to you that would have you say it has to be this
yeah,
way,
yeah,
and what you saw looking back?
yeah.
Because this is another thing I know people deal with, that
Hmm.
we kind of get so used to our way of seeing the world
Yeah,
that we'll miss other possible ways of looking at things, doing things
yeah,
that keep us locked in patterns that, like, kind of, well, like you said, will have us survive,
right.
but not really thrive, to be kind of
Yeah,
cliche, right?
yeah. Yeah. At the time, you know, my mindset was, well, there's nobody else that can do these things.
Mm-hmm.
I have to do them, you know, and it was all of the things that come with business ownership, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
all of the kind of administrative side of things and payroll and budgeting and, you know, all of those. Um, and it was also the idea that I felt personally responsible for everybody in my company. And I do still feel that way sometimes, things
Yeah.
that I'm working through. But so in my mind, it was, well, I'm responsible for all of them, so I can't leave them hanging in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than simply, I say simply, I know it's not simple, but rather than preparing them for the time that I was going to be out, I just kind of made the assumption that I would still have to do everything and they can't do it without me. So some of it was just the idea that, you know, maybe I didn't have as much faith in other people as I should have. And some of
Mm-hmm.
it was just thinking like, well, I'm the only one who can do it. And it's more work for me to try to teach other people how to do it.
Yeah.
Um, and I have since learned. So when I had my second child, I took a legitimate almost 3 months maternity leave. So
Mm.
I definitely learned from that experience. But um, you know, a lot of it is just remembering that, you know, we're behavior analysts. We have the skills to teach other people.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people also want those opportunities, and learning that I have staff who they've stuck around here for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
and giving them the opportunity to show that I do have that trust in them and that they can do those things,
Yep.
I think is huge for them. And it was a hard lesson for me as well, but it is one that I have definitely been reinforced for at this point. So, you know, I'm not working over 40 hours anymore. I don't, I can take a vacation without feeling like the company is gonna implode when I'm not there. I can, I can spend time with my kids as they're growing up, so it was a big challenge at that point to get through that. But I do feel like I've learned a lot, and hopefully too, my staff sees that I have that trust in them as well, and that they've been given those opportunities and they're doing a great job with it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
A couple things I just want to
Mhm.
underline and highlight is that first, it's like I'm hearing the value of looking to replace yourself and looking at all those things you do
Mhm.
and teaching people on your team to do them.
Yep.
And then the other thing I'm hearing is taking the perspective that people really want to learn and people want to grow and people want to contribute.
Yep.
And I'm saying that because that's something that I personally bump up against in my leadership roles is I think
Mhm.
that, well, who's going to want to do this?
Right.
Right. But it turns out people really want to contribute.
Yep.
You just got to set that aside and invite them to contribute.
Yes. Yeah.
And I am curious, how was it? You said one of the things stopping you was, I don't have the time to teach people.
Yeah.
How long did it take? How hard was it when you
Um,
started doing it?
you know, not as bad as I thought it would
Uh-huh.
be. So definitely something that like we have to kind of get out of our own heads about.
Yeah.
And obviously, like there are, more efficient ways to do things here and there when it comes to even like teaching other people, but um, not bad. I now have a practice manager who is phenomenal. I have an office manager as well. And so, I do think that we've really built up our structure to allow for me to take more steps back. And it's really nice too to see how much they want to step up.
Mhm.
And there are times where, they'll even say like, why are you doing that, Reena? Like, I'll do that. Just show me how to
Uh-huh.
do it. Which
Yeah.
is always like, oh, yes, that's what you're here for. So I mean, it has been a few years that we've, kind of worked towards that, but it was small steps at a time that made a big difference. Um, and you know, um, it's refreshing and it feels good. And I think one of the big things for me too, when it comes to like teaching other people some of these roles and giving these things, I now also have a clinical director because for a while I was acting as both, the owner, but also the clinical director here. And that was really challenging because it was like, I had these two different hats that I was switching back and forth between and
Yeah.
didn't feel like I could do it as efficiently. And I have a clinical director who's doing a great job. And what I realize about myself too is that I also just want other people to be better at this than I am.
Mhm.
I want them to learn more, and whether that's coming from me or from, other people, more mentors, kind of branching out. That's what I want because there's no growth in this field if we all just kind of stay stagnant. So it's also just really nice to see a lot of my other clinicians growing and learning more and even, like, oh, wow, like I didn't know that. I'm learning from you too. And this is really cool. So that's been a fun journey.
Yeah, well, I love that you said that you actually have found opportunity to learn from the
Mm.
people you're developing. And that's something I've discovered for myself is that
Mm.
as I turn things over and invite people to
Yeah.
contribute, a lot of times people have really good ideas
Yeah.
that are better than what I would have come up with.
Yep.
And then they might need some help
Sure.
implementing them or, like I've got
Right.
something to contribute,
Yeah.
but they have really good ideas.
Yep.
I'm like, oh yeah, okay, let's do
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Um, you said there were a couple things though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The second one, which I think is probably what a lot of people have dealt with, was COVID, the pandemic.
Yes.
That was, a really big challenge. It'll probably be ingrained, in my brain. The day that we ended up making the call to shut down. It was, I believe it was May 23rd, or excuse me, March 23rd of
Yeah.
2020. And I actually was working from home that day because I think my son might have been sick. And I just was, looking at all of the announcements in the news, and the state of Michigan had just come out with their announcements too. And I ended up doing a Zoom call with my entire staff. And I just remember, choking back tears, trying to figure out like what we were going to do. And letting them know what the plan was at the time. And I know it was a struggle for everybody. We all had a lot of challenges, and it was one of those times where I think the hardest thing for me was, again, that idea of feeling personally responsible for everybody.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of things that I did that I don't have any regrets. I don't regret that I did these things, but I definitely stretched myself really thin. Ended up like continuing to pay for everybody's health insurance to make sure that they didn't lose that. Applied for the PPP loan, didn't get it the first time around, got it the second time, ended up taking out a disaster loan, a lot of these other things. And until we were able to at least, we started with a little bit of telehealth, but I didn't push it too hard until we were able to bring people back, kind of on a part-time basis, and, doing hazard pay and like all of these other things that, like, from a financial perspective was probably not great. And I am still, feeling the effects of some of that, even 5 years later from all of that initially. But, I knew that it was something that I think would have stuck with me even more if I hadn't done those things. And I would rather feel the regret of dealing with like financial burden than, somebody not having their insurance and not being able to go see a doctor if they got sick during that time when everybody was struggling. So I think one of the hardest things was, when we came back and trying to kind of figure out like this new world that we were in, and then trying to figure out like, okay, how do I recoup some of this? And like I said, it's there are still things that we're feeling the effects of, debt and things like that. But it is what it is, and I'm still here 5 years later and growing strong. But at that time, there was a lot of questioning of, is it worth it? Is it worth it to keep trying to figure this out? Is it worth it trying to, continue paying rent? Because at the time, my landlord was not really willing to, help out in that situation. And is it worth it to hope that we'll be able to keep going once we can reopen? Will we be able to reopen? And so it was, and then of course there was just the fear of like, what is this? Are we gonna get past this? So that was a really tough time that hopefully we don't ever have to experience something to that degree again. And I know it was one that, like I said, a lot of people really struggled with too. But what I think helped a lot during that time was the resilience of a lot of my staff too, where when we were able to reopen, it was just a lot of like, they wanted to do it. They wanted to get back to it. They wanted to see these kids. They hated that they were missing months of services too. And seeing how much they also just felt so passionately about helping these kids was really the driving force behind me being able to like get back to it and kind of just, we'll figure it out. We'll take more loans if we need to.
Yeah. How well, I like that, you found inspiration from your staff. That was actually going to be my question was, well, how did you like take care of yourself? Right.
I did a lot of running outside. So that was part of it, was just, physically taking care of myself so that it could try to help, mentally. And I will admit, same thing as like, my previous issue. I didn't really put myself first for a while. And so there was a lot of strain, there was a lot of stress. It was a really, difficult time. But I had and I still do, I have a really good support system. My husband is wonderful and he has supported me so much through all of this, from the beginning. Even when there are the ebbs and flows that come with owning a business, he has always stood behind me. And, no matter what decision I would inevitably make, he would be behind it, which was really helpful. And my family is all here, which is nice too. So I was fortunate that my parents were able to help us out if there were ever times where we were struggling, and, friends. I have since, and it's again funny, I encourage everybody else to do this, but it took me forever to do it. But I go to therapy, and I cannot understate how important I think that is for everybody, really, no matter what field you're in. But
what have you found valuable about that?
It's having, honestly, having an unbiased person that I can say everything that I'm feeling and who can look at it objectively, and honestly tell me whether or not I'm being ridiculous, or if there are things that, are helping me kind of parse out what is and isn't in my control. And that has helped a lot, because I think when I personally try to control the uncontrollable, that's where things can spiral a little bit. That's where I can get into these moments of feeling burnt out, because then it feels like no matter what I do, I can't fix it. I can't make it better. Why do I keep trying if I can't do it? But it's like, oh, well, no, that's actually not something that I could have controlled in the first place. So now it's a matter of figuring out how do I respond to it, as opposed to how do I try to control it? And, just again, I know every behavior analyst is different, but I do think that there are certain things that we all kind of experience. And sometimes that almost anxious perfectionism is something that I see in a lot of people in this field. And so I have personally found a lot of value in being able to talk to somebody about that, and realizing that not everything is my responsibility. I don't have to do everything.
Yeah. I really appreciate you sharing that. I see a coach who probably would be a therapist. He's just,
Yeah.
he's not licensed as a therapist.
Sure.
And the work we do, to me, feels like it's not just advice. It's actually looking at a lot of pretty deep self-reflection.
Yeah.
And one thing I've found really valuable is just having another pair of eyes on what I'm dealing with, because I can only see this direction, and I can't see this direction,
right?
And sometimes I'm being a real jerk and I don't necessarily see it that way.
Sure.
And it's good to have someone say hey, or maybe you got to loosen up on this one. Like you said, stop trying to control it so much. Cool. We are getting close to the time we've set aside.
I told you I talk a lot.
Right? So what's tell me how it's going now, what's next for you, both in terms of your business, but also how you want to grow and develop and learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Things are going very well. This has been, kind of in spite of a lot of the, we know there's a lot of economic uncertainty and things like that, but it's been a good year. for us. We've grown in not so much size. That's not really what my goals are for the Spark Center. We really more want to kind of grow in like the programs that we can offer. So again, kind of focusing on a lot of these like social skills groups. We are primarily early intervention. We currently see kids through the age of 10. We're trying to expand that a little bit, just so that we can kind of capture some of these kiddos who are doing fine in school, but maybe struggle with, some of their social opportunities, or even just like after school activities, like having the opportunity to be a kid without it feeling so much like therapy.
Yes.
We don't offer a lot of after school services because we just don't feel like it's appropriate for kids to have to go to school all day and then have to come to, 2 or 3 hours of therapy.
Right.
So, having other programs like, we're working on our OT, coming up with a program that's like almost like a sports readiness program. So like kids who want to do after school sports, but maybe are struggling with some of their fine and gross motor skills, working on some of those things. Again, that summer program, we are, this past summer was the first year that we ran it in that capacity. And so we're working on kind of troubleshooting some of the things that maybe didn't go so well there. Again, we do want to kind of develop some internship opportunities, especially for, we're almost thinking like high schoolers, so that they can kind of get introduced to the field and determine if this is something that they would want to do. And then we can almost like create a pipeline for RBTs, so that once they graduate, and maybe if they decide to go the route of starting school, great, here's a good part-time job that you could have while you're going through your undergrad, different things like that. So those are some of the big projects that we're working on currently.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have 2 more questions.
Yeah.
2 more questions. First is, what are you proud of?
Oh gosh. I mean, all of it. It's, I am just proud of the fact that through all of those challenges, we're still here. We're still standing, and not just standing, but like you were saying, there are some days where it feels like we're just surviving. But right now it does feel like more like thriving. And just knowing how many kids we have been able to provide services for, again, especially in a state that was previously ranked so poorly. And so the idea that we could have had any impact on improving that does make me feel really proud that we are making a difference with some of these kids and their families.
Awesome. And my last question is, how can people reach you?
Yes, a few different ways. So our website is sparkcenterforautism.com, and that has multiple like pathways to get a hold of us too. There's also our office phone number, which is 248-238-9772. People can email us. So the best email address there is info@sparkcenterforautism.com. Our business, and also myself, we are on LinkedIn. And we also have other social media pages, Facebook, Instagram. That's kind of all I know how to use. So that's what we have. Don't look for me on TikTok, because I don't know how to do that.
Probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Reena, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, really, my pleasure. It's been a delightful conversation. I really appreciate the insights, and just thanks for being someone who makes a difference in the world.
Thank you.
Brings that commitment to life.
Thank you.
And thank you for those of you watching, listening. That concludes this episode. As always, of course, give us a 5-star review, a like, whatever, positive reinforcement is there on your platform you're finding it. And we will see you back here next time on The Flex.